Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Diane Sare, and Diane and I are going to talk about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. So, Diane, wasn't it frightening?
It was, but it was completely to be expected. And as you know, I warned about exactly this on the 1st of July. I heard from a friend that various intelligence sources were discussing the threat to Trump, and I had actually wondered about it as soon as I heard the press coverage of the assassination attempt of the Prime Minister of Slovakia. Robert Fico, who is one of those precious, rare dissident voices in NATO, saying that it is a fool's errand or worse to try and be in a war with Russia and to send Ukraine, which is losing the war, unlimited long-range missiles and now F-16 fighter jets, which can carry a nuclear payload, that this is going to bring us to the brink of World War III or over the brink into World War III, into possible Armageddon. But the way the press described Fico was, oh, he's just a populist, blah, blah. And it's just a lone assassin who, by the way, happened to have a Ukrainian wife who shot him 5 times. It is a miracle that he lived. They got him to the hospital right away. He underwent all kinds of surgery. He was not well enough to attend the NATO summit in Washington, but he sent a message saying the idea of a pathway for Ukraine to join NATO is insane. It will lead to World War III if we're not already in it. So the way the press described Fico and the way the press described Donald Trump, I thought they're putting a target on Trump. And as Scott Ritter, our mutual friend, said in an interview I heard yesterday, he made the point about Biden's comments. And I don't think you can particularly blame Biden for anything he says. I don't think he's all there anymore. But he repeats, like people who have dementia, their filter about what they're supposed to say in public
Mm-hmm.
kind of goes away. So Biden announced, for example, the end of the Nord Stream pipelines.
Mm.
He was clearly in on the discussions that was going to be done. So he said to fundraisers, we're going to put a bullseye on Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
In a phone call, he called Trump an existential threat to the republic. And Scott correctly said, what are you supposed to do if someone's an existential threat to the republic? So that also creates incentive, or it creates the possibility of picking up someone that can be used as a patsy to do this. And that's what I think the shooter was, a 20-year-old crooks, whatever his background, he was deployed, whether he knew he was or not. And I don't think it's as simple as just Biden. I think it's very dangerous that our nation would fall into this kind of partisan blame game, but that the world is in a moment of transition. The United States holds the key. We're the keystone. Are we going to plunge toward World War III? Are we going to try and cling to the remnants of a dead British Empire, even at the risk of annihilating everyone on the planet? Or can we go back to our identity as the first successful revolution against colonialism, in which case we would be rejoicing about what's happening with the BRICS process. We would say, thank God, a system is emerging which treats all nations equally with mutual respect. So I
Mm.
think that's the danger. And as I warned, and we can discuss, I don't think this is the last of destabilizing actions to the United States.
So when you say destabilizing actions to the United States, are you talking about other attempted assassination on other people?
Yes, emphatically yes. Perhaps again on Trump, perhaps on Biden. Think how they could spin an assassination attempt on Joe Biden, on Kennedy, or perhaps a terror attack. I think we are in a really dangerous situation right now, and I would really warn people who are Trump supporters, who I've met quite a lot of, and they said, well, he survived, he's got it in the bag, he's going to win the election. What makes you think we're going to have an election? In other words, I wouldn't take anything for granted right now. We have to get our heads level, and we have to think from a strategic perspective. A colleague of mine just happened to have some meetings where he learned that our various election integrity groups, which used to be the people claiming Russia hacked the DNC. In other words, they're not really integrity groups, they're sabotage groups. They are saying there might be a power outage on election day.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's almost like 9/11 happening on primary day,
right,
you know,
right.
a power outage. Uh, they're saying for one particular area, there couldn't be a power outage throughout the country, right?
Well, there could, and I have to say our electrical grid is very vulnerable. We see that we have a lot of disruption even when you have major solar flares and solar storms that disrupt the magnetic field. So, and we don't, I've been advocating for years that all of our power lines should be underground, for example. And
Mm-hmm.
people say, oh, that's so expensive. Well, how expensive is it to repair them every time? And what do we lose every time we have all these blackouts everywhere?
Mm-hmm.
We have no sense of the future. We no longer think that way. And I think that's part of the reason we're in such a mess. One thing I think people should consider, had Trump not moved his head, had the bullet hit its mark, and Trump,
Yes.
God forbid, lost his life,
Yep.
what would our nation look like right now? Would
Right.
there have been riots? Would would everyone just have given up and crawled in a hole and never come out? What would have happened to our nation? And the people who would want to bring that on our nation have not been identified. I also totally agree with Scott that there were so many quote unquote failures surrounding this assassination attempt that to entrust the investigation of it to the FBI, to the agencies that were responsible for Trump's security, forget it. You might as well get the Warren Commission to come back in and tell us about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to get the truth. And every time you have a cover up, that means you're conceding ground to the people who committed the crime. And that's why I think we are really in great danger right now if people can't elevate themselves. Now, what mitigates that danger is the goodness, in spite of all of the bombardment of the American people by fake news and horrible whatever. The American people don't want that. And as Tucker Carlson said last night at the Republican convention, he said Trump could have seized that moment to really create a mob, to create a retributive, enraged mob blaming Biden, blaming the Democrats. He didn't do that. He called for unity. And the people have responded. And I think a lot of cooler heads on the Democratic side also realize they should tone down their rhetoric. And I think that's where sometimes the intelligence agencies, the British imperial system who plan these attacks, they miscalculate. They count on a pairwise interaction. They count on having more control over what we think than they actually have. They don't conclude that people might act for the good, that people might act for unity and the good of the nation, and that's where we can outflank them.
So, because of that unfortunate situation, um, Kennedy has Secret Service protection now, which is a good thing, I think.
Yeah.
So, when this first happened and I was talking to Russell about it, and I said, um, if they really wanted to get to the bottom of this, they could have maimed him. They could have just shot his leg or something that keep him alive so that they could get the full story out of him. No, but they shot him dead. And the other thing is, there's speculation now that there were other shooters involved.
Right. Well, any assassination attempt, if you're serious, would not just have one shooter.
Uh-huh.
So I think we have to look at all of this, and then you have to take everything that's being publicly released with a giant grain of salt, because you know that they're not going to tell us the truth. And the truth is, you have to link what happened to Trump to what happened to Prime Minister Fico of Slovakia. These are not two isolated events. And I also would say you have to consider what it means that Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, the murderous war criminal, is going to be allowed to address our Congress next week. Is that going to be a point for, I don't know what, something to occur that brings in more instability? There's certainly a great deal of justified anger that a war criminal is being brought in here to address the US Congress. Will people say that that justifies violence? And this is what Alexander Hamilton was so concerned about all the time. He worried so much about mob rule. He was so disheartened by the failed French Revolution that it just turned into a bunch of bloodletting. And that's what you see on your worst, where you get to a point where you feel helpless and you feel desperate and you act out of pure rage. And it's very dangerous. And this is why it's so important that people feel they can have justice. And part of the problem we have in the United States right now is where do you get justice? Who is going to actually uphold the principles of our Constitution, who also has the power to make it stick? The
Uh,
fact, go ahead.
uh, does Donald Trump understand the grave danger he's under?
I think he has an idea of that now. I'm sure he did before. I'm not sure he fully understands why, although I think he has a glimmer of that as well.
But there are people close to him that understand it, wouldn't you think?
I think he understands it better than they do, frankly.
Okay.
Um, he, I don't know him. I've never met him. He's definitely an unusual person. What comes across from him, why he's so popular, which is different than a lot of our presidents recently, is he really connects with people.
Mm-hmm.
He clearly likes them. He loves them, and therefore they reciprocate, and they have a kind of trust in him. So I have my own ideas. I think that he could use that to better advantage, as Kennedy did, instead of pandering to what he thinks are hot button issues, actually challenging people to have a deeper understanding of things. Like when Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you,
Right.
but what you can do for your country. And then what people never, what our country can do for mankind is what he continued with. That's, I think, what we need more of from our leaders, is they have a responsibility to also make the population better, not just to pander to whatever their opinion poll takers tell them the latest opinion is.
So the assassin, the would-be assassin, we don't know much about him, and that's troubling. What do you think?
Well, that's true, but as we agree, I believe he wasn't acting alone, and he may be the least significant part of this operation. So people can dig and dig, and I know there's footage of him in a BlackRock commercial,
Right.
and he wrote these various, he supposedly wrote something online that was somewhat ominous prior. So it's a 20-year-old whose identity is not fully formed, who apparently was a bit of an outcast in school. Such people are easy to manipulate. I think what we're more interested in is who was manipulating him and why.
You know, the fact that he's 20 years old, he's just a young boy, and he lived with his parents. The press has not done anything to talk to the parents at all, and I find that troubling.
Well, I don't know that they have or haven't. I mean, I have to say, we've got to take everything with a grain of salt. And the mainstream media has been despicable on virtually all matters. Just before talking with you, I was on a radio interview where the host was completely shocked that I said we had overthrown the government of Ukraine in 2014. He knew nothing about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so, you know, I, um, I don't know if they've talked to the parents or not. I don't know if the parents were in on it. I don't know if the parents worked for the FBI or NSA or,
Right,
don't know any of this. But I
right.
think what we can do, what those of us mere mortals can do with a God-given mind, is to look at the strategic situation and consider whose benefit would it be to totally destabilize the United States. And go ahead.
So if they had eliminated Trump, God forbid, or anybody else, if Trump was eliminated, then that would have thrown the entire election up in the air, wouldn't you say?
Yes, absolutely. Because I don't know who the Republicans would have chosen. Would they have stuck that horrible warmongering witch Nikki Haley in there?
Hmm.
You know, it's really scary. It's a scary thought. People are unique. It's not true that one person can replace another. Think about when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Jesse Jackson
Right.
tried, whatever, and he also had a bit of an ego. So, but he was not capable. He didn't have the heart. In a sense, it's really about heart. It really is about love, in a sense, what makes one a leader. And then you're obligated to actually know what you're talking about, which is the next step. But I think that would have been an unmitigated catastrophe and would put us even much farther on the road toward nuclear war.
Um, oh, that's an awful thought. Um, but what I found interesting or frightening is that the this attempted assassination took place 2 days before the Republican National Convention. I think that's awful. That was timed, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And so, you know, and well, I switched the stations a lot, and MSNBC has not scaled down their hate and their the way they dislike Trump. They haven't scaled back at all to create some kind of a calming and unified effect in this country. It's they're still fueling the fire constantly, and that doesn't help. You
No, no, not at all, because it gives cover for whatever comes next. And
know.
that's why I'm saying we really have to think strategically. The issue is that this $2 quadrillion bubble of derivatives debt obligations held by the City of London, Wall Street, the Bank for International Settlements, the Federal Reserve, it's unsustainable. It's going to collapse. They are propping it up because these wars generate a lot of money. By the way, the migrants generate a lot of money. They're a conduit. That's one of the purposes of this flood of migrants, is the conduit for money. They're paying, I've heard $1,300, $14 a seat on the bus to get them up here per person from Texas. They're paying the hotels the top dollar, $500 a night that's posted on the door that no one ever pays who stays there. We always pay, you use your AAA or your this or that, and you get it.
Right.
They're paying the hotels the absolute top dollar. They're giving no bid contracts to companies like this .go that doesn't even know how to supply food. They're giving these poor people food that makes them sick. And then they have intermingled with them terrorists from different drug gangs because we're not vetting. And it stinks to high heaven. But one element of this is the money laundering. Think about, they're giving them prepaid debit cards.
Mm-hmm.
What is not a money flow through if that is not a money flow through?
And so then there's also the issue of when they come into this country, they're they're being allowed to vote. Am I correct?
It depends, but if you can get a driver's license, as in New York, you get an invitation to register to vote when you apply for your license. So it would indicate that a lot of these people are registered. I have a very good friend who she lives in New Jersey. She is from another country, but she married an American. She's now a green card holder. And she got very freaked out because two canvassers for a campaign came to her door and told her that she could register to vote. She said, I'm not a US citizen. I don't want to register to vote. I want to do this legally. But they were telling her she should register and vote for their candidate. And then I got another report from someone. I was just I'm out on the streets, I'm meeting a lot of people. I don't even remember where I was, but the woman said that she had just attended the citizenship ceremony of a friend of hers. And as soon as they grant you your citizenship, they take you aside and say, now you can register to vote and you can affiliate with the Democratic Party.
So I think this is an effort with the influx of people to ensure the Democrats win in November. Would you say that was accurate?
Probably, but they don't even need that because, as I saw from what happened with my election results in 2022, a lot of the shifting of votes occurs electronically. It's
Mm.
probably helpful to have, just as they're using the migrants as a kind of a conduit for laundering money, it's a nice cover for how you're flipping votes around arbitrarily through your internet settings.
And so, from your observations, what does the establishment fear most about Donald Trump?
What the establishment fears the most is Lyndon LaRouche. And Henry Kissinger actually said that he thought the worst thing that could possibly happen is when the system collapsed, that LaRouche would be around. So, in the ways that Trump echoes what LaRouche would do, like stopping a war with Russia, which is that's one of their big operations, they fear him. Also, the British House of Lords wrote a report, I forget if it was 2018 or 2019, on the upcoming 2020 US elections, where they said Trump could not be allowed to be reelected. And the reason they gave is that he had unilaterally pulled the US out of the Paris Accords. Now that's public. That's the British House of Lords. I forget the title of the report saying, and what was the Paris Climate Accord? They don't care about the environment. It's just a scheme for the energy companies to rip people off and launder money and direct a certain cash flow while they make sure that nations in Africa and places like Haiti never get to have modern electricity, that they continue to burn charcoal and cow dung and things like that. So Trump pulled the United States out of that because he correctly said it was a violation of our sovereignty, and the British identified that as a major threat.
Mm. So we're towards the end of July. Um, what do you see coming down the pike?
You know, it really depends on Americans finding their citizenship. And what I mean by that is people cannot sit on the sidelines. You must be in the street at this point. There is no guarantee of a fair election. And it is important for people to think. We don't want to be the little people that Friedrich Schiller talked about in the French Revolution, where you get all jacked up because a migrant is getting more money than your grandmother. That's bad, but please, do not get incensed over petty issues. We're either going to win or lose everything for generations to come in this moment. And therefore, we have to be really big people and big thinkers. And we have to think about what the world should look like 50 years after we're dead. And then we have to fight for that.
So, the establishment, a, a good part of the establishment is still propping up Joe Biden. He's obviously an ill man, very ill.
Yeah, he even tweeted it out on X. Did you know that? Or
No.
whoever runs his Twitter account wrote, "I am sick."
Oh, wow. Wow.
Like
So,
nobody noticed. And our darling Governor Hochul, who if you see her up close, she looks pretty good on television. But when I saw her in person the other day, I was shocked. She looks terrible. I mean, she's just aged and not healthy at all. And she's there cheering for Biden. Um, I don't know, is that for money? Probably some scheme, some deal. So yeah, he is sick and the voices are growing. Chuck Schumer, who will have been in Washington for 50 years
good.
when he completes this Senate term, which ends in 2026, 2028. He'll have been in Washington for 50 years, and he's now calling for Biden to step aside. Give me a break. Why
Mhm.
doesn't Pelosi, Schumer, Biden, why don't all of these old, and I have nothing against being old, people can be brilliant and have a lot of experience, but you shouldn't sit in your office. The founding fathers did not intend for people to be in the Senate for, 35 years or in the House for 50 years. That was not the point of having, why do you think they have a 2-year term or a 6-year term?
Mhm, mhm. Do you think that Donald Trump is still sharp?
Seems to be. I
Okay.
haven't seen any indication. He's pretty quick on his feet, like when Biden said in the debate, "We beat Medicare."
Right,
And Trump
right.
picked right up on it. Yeah, you sure did. You beat it into the ground, or whatever it was he said.
So Diane, I'm sure as the election unfolds that you and I will be talking again. So give us a little update on your campaign.
Well, I'm on the ballot. You helped, and many. Scott Ritter came and signed the petition. That was fun. We got close to 70,000 signatures, which is really a tour de force because nobody did that without paying people. The Kennedy team, it looks like Kennedy will be on the ballot in New York. It'll be finally official the 29th of July, but the staff at the Board of Elections concluded that he has 108,000 valid signatures. But they ended up paying people $90 an hour to petition. And a lot of people on my team said, gee, for that, we could have made a down payment on a house.
Right.
um, so I'm on the ballot and I'm getting help from interesting places. A lot of retired military are very interested in my campaign. Obviously, people who've been in war know what war is and don't think we should be recklessly plunging into another one.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Also, I just visited Rome, New York, where the tornado hit. Horrible devastation. And people were saying to me, "We're so glad you came here. Nobody cares about us." And I met a utility worker who really was compassionate. He said, where the path of this tornado was through one of the poorest parts of the town where everybody is a renter. They don't have homeowners insurance. They're just going to be in hotels. If you're poor, this is the kind of event that could change your life permanently. You
Mhm.
might be in a shelter for 2 years or 5 years. It upends your entire life. Who's doing anything about that? So these are my people. Um, and it's just a matter of reaching them and pulling together a force to get the job done. And I consider victory getting the policy through. I don't know what's going to happen with the elections. I should win. I should be in the Senate. There's no reason for anyone to vote for either of the other stupid candidates. But we've got to get the policy through regardless.
Have you had any conversations at all with Kirsten Gillibrand?
I did about a year and a half ago,
Okay.
before I was running against her, about the kill list. And she said the kill list was just Russian disinformation.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
So, Diane, I know you have to run. So you've been listening to Diane Sare, who was gracious enough to talk about the unfortunate event of last Saturday and also her campaign for U.S. Senate. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Diane, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and have a great day, and thank you for listening, everybody. Have a great day also.
Thanks.